Same. Why don't we start with one of the big drops of the week that I talked about for a quick second there is Loki, and that is the, I believe, fifth episode of the series, and that episode was titled Journey into Mystery. We had, Loki at the end of the episode 4. He woke up and he was in this strange place, and he was being looked over by 4 Lokis. He had boastful Loki, kid Loki, and then you had the old Loki, and then of course, obviously, alligator Loki that everyone is obsessed with. And he kind of woke up, and it was about him figuring out where he was. What were your kind of general thoughts on this episode?
I liked it a lot. It really felt like getting to the premise of the show a bit. You're getting to all these different multiverses, essentially, Lokis who are all different timelines and different types of characters, and I really like seeing all these different versions of the Lokis interact. I was a bit let down, mostly because I thought like this should have been episode like 3 or, I feel like we're a bit late in the show to be having just like a romp episode.
Yeah.
But I had a really good time with it, and you can see the Rick and Morty vibes from this writer in this episode, like all the different various Lokis and all the Easter eggs and small little references in the background. It felt like something that would have been in a Rick and Morty episode in an alternate universe. So I was pretty happy with it, and I had a good time, and I can't wait for the finale.
Yeah, me either. I'm really looking forward to the finale. Just like I say a million times, we'll save our theories for the end, but I have a theory about who might be in the castle at the end and what we might get for a post-credit scene, and I'm going to drop maybe a deeper explanation of this theory on TikTok later today, so check that out. We are at TikTok at Movie Changeup. But yeah, Richard E. Grant, when they announced he was in this cast, I was like a little confused, and then as the show went on, he didn't appear, and then he finally did appear in this episode, and he had his big moment. And I kind of really like what he did. A lot of people have a theory that he is gonna that it was a fake out and his was an illusion, basically his appearance at the end, and that he's gonna be the big villain at the end and be in the castle. And I don't believe that, partially because you have, the return of Mobius here, and Mobius kind of gives that speech about how you can change and you can do good, and he's kind of hears that speech and he realizes maybe he can do good. And he has a thing at the beginning where he's like talking about how their whole thing, the Loki, his whole mantra is like glorious power, glorious purpose. And right as he makes, Asgard and constructs Asgard to distract that big smoke monster, he yells out glorious purpose. And I think that's him finally realizing like what his purpose was in life. It was kind of to be there in that moment. And I will also add, it's the first time they've had a cloud or a smoke monster that I didn't think was dumb. Any movie or any show or anything that's ever had a cloud or a smoke monster, I always thought was it looked bad, and this was the first one that didn't, and I actually liked it.
Yeah, I was thinking about you during the episode, and I saw the giant smoke monster. I was like, oh, I wonder if Joe's buying into this or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love Richard E. Grant as old Loki, or classic Loki, or whatever they called him here. I think it was a great kind of piece of stunt casting. It was just a one episode and done, essentially. Maybe he'll come back for the finale, but either way, I don't see him being like a recurring character on the show or anything like that.
Well, there's only one episode left, so it's either the next episode or never again. So
yeah, because I'm sure there's going to be a second season. I'm running kind of on the assumption there's a second season for this show, but I like the whole premise of this, that they're stuck in this kind of like beyond time limbo kind of place where all the things that get erased go. And of course, because Loki survived, all the Lokis are kind of just still alive, hanging out in this like apocalyptic kind of like beyond time event. And I like too that they're all kind of in this like stagnant Arrested Development kind of state where they weren't really like changing or growing. They're just like, oh yeah, we just survived, that's all we can really do. And Loki and Sylvie come in as kind of this catalyst to change them a little bit. And like you said, I think people are theorizing that the old Loki's going to come back and be the big bad, but I don't really think that's true. I think that almost would undermine the whole plot of the episode. Like this episode feels like Loki's learning they can change and learn they can grow and become better people. And a lot of that is through the catalyst of Sylvie and our Loki. But I think if you go and say, oh, actually they can't change and Loki is actually bad, I think that kind of undermines not just the episode, but a lot of what the show is trying to go for and trying to say about Loki and characters and people.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was kind of the message of the episode. If you can change, and then at the end, it's like, oh, Richard E. Grant, Loki, who had the big change, ultimately didn't change, is kind of pointless. And I will say I'm also glad we got Mobius back. I'm glad he returned, and I loved the moment in the beginning. We're kind of jumping around a little bit here, but I love the moment in the beginning of Sylvie just taking the risk and pruning herself,
Mm-hmm.
and then appearing in like that beyond world or whatever.
Yeah, I like it too because it shows the change in the characters. Like just a couple episodes ago, you wouldn't have seen either one of these Lokis potentially sacrifice themselves for somebody else, and
Yep.
the fact that she was willing to take that risk, and even though she felt confident that it went somewhere semi-safe, I don't think she knew for sure, obviously, and that could have just been the end. But she had that level of faith
Yeah.
to take the risk for Loki.
Yeah. And I will say I like the fight with all of the Lokis when we meet President Loki, and it kind of kicks off with Alligator Loki biting his hand off. That one.
Yeah, there was some. The whole action in this episode was pretty ridiculous, and whether it was just all of Loki's fighting each other or the action at the end, I think they were really leaned into just kind of like the fun and the ridiculousness of this premise in the episode here.
Yeah. Do you have any more you want to add about this? Any negatives you have about this episode?
I don't have a ton of negatives. I think this Renslayer plot towards the beginning with Renslayer and Sylvie, I think was a bit of a negative. I think it was very obvious that Renslayer was not playing her whole hand, and I didn't think Sylvie was that dumb to buy along and play along to this plot.
Yeah.
Like if she's a Loki, she should be a step ahead of Renslayer, and when Renslayer pulls that like, oh, actually, I'm not helping you. Sylvie should be like, oh, okay, because I'm actually ahead of you still.
Yeah.
Like that would have been the plot twist there. But that's not a huge criticism. Like those are just small things.
Yeah.
I think the episode, like I said, we went one away from the finale, so I don't know how much of this was a waste of time and how much of this was worth it. But I guess I'm just gonna have to wait and see what we get from the rest of it. I also thought boastful Loki was very cool, and then ended up not doing a lot this episode.
Yeah.
Because he was sitting there talking in that base, saying like, "Oh, I killed all the Avengers and I took all the stones," and none of them are really believing him. And it would have been fun to see him have a little bit of a cool moment towards the end, some kind of moment similar to the other Loki had.
Yeah, I would have been down for that. And I like the moment of kid Loki basically like, oh, what did you hear to cause a deviation in the timeline? And he's like, I killed Thor. And there's some theories floating around of when that might have happened, but maybe it wasn't exactly on purpose, as you kind of are meant to believe in the episode.
And I like too that the kid Loki is sort of the leader of all these other Lokis. Like the fact that he killed Thor, I guess, is what puts him as like, oh, he's a badass. He killed Thor, and we all kind of answer to him.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that one of them, Richard E. Grant, and the other one's like this giant hammer wielding, like bodybuilding looking guy.
Yeah.
And they answer this little kid, and the other one's an alligator. So.
Yeah. Do you have any theories potentially for next episode?
It's hard to have theories every time. I have a theory on the show, or either come out in front of me and say, "Oh yeah, the timekeepers aren't real. You were right, and now we know." But I have no idea who's going to be in that castle. I have two minds about it, honestly. I guess my first theory is that it's an easy answer. It's Loki. We have an evil Loki who's in that castle, who's taken over, and he's been kind of controlling all of this from the beginning. He's been making sure that no Lokis can become good, because if they become good, they'll try and take him down. So whenever someone starts to become good, he takes him out, and he's trying to maintain himself as like the prime Loki. That's my one direction. And the other direction, I think, is what internet fans would love to see, what Reddit would be happy about, and that's Kang. If Kang the Conqueror really does show up, I think that a big castle in the end of time is probably the place to do it. So I think that would be a place to bring in, if not Kang, some kind of larger scale comic book villain. Or just pull it back and be like, yeah, it was Loki. The show is called Loki, guys. It's about Loki. We're not going to pull in random characters with no setup into the show. We'll see where they go with that.
All right, so here is my theory. My theory is the person in the castle is Loki, like you said. And then, he'll defeat Loki, and he thinks he's won the day, and he thinks he's done the right thing. And then there will be a post-credit scene, or maybe a scene towards the end, where we find out that the reason Loki has this prime timeline, and the timeline that's correct, is because it's the one where Kang was never created, because Kang is too dangerous to ever be created. And so with Loki creating all of destroying the TVA and creating all these multiverses, he has basically given birth to Kang, who is now going to be the main. He's going to basically be the new Thanos.
I really like that. I think I would love to see how this show be that level of setup because I think that is the premise of the MCU is like this TV show. Essentially, like you're getting everything you watch is one part of a larger story. So I think if you get the setup for a villain here that becomes a major player later on, that makes it feel like we're not wasting our time on the shows here.
Yeah,
I want to throw out another theory when we're
yeah.
done talking about this one, but I do want to mention Miss Minutes has been returning. She hasn't been on the show for a while, and this was her kind of big return to the show. And I'm throwing out a wild theory here, Joe. I don't know if I'm going to stick by it next week or not, but I wouldn't be surprised they walk into that castle and Miss Minutes is in there, and she's been kind of manipulating. It might not literally be Miss Minutes. I think she could be like an avatar stand-in for something else, but I wouldn't be surprised if Miss Minutes is some kind of bad guy and that Miss Minutes has been underestimated because it's an animated clock. It's just kind of like this neat little thing, but in the background, it's been kind of the eyes and ears of Kang or whoever is the bad guy here, and that could be kind of a big, fun twist at the end. This character you underestimated was actually part of the plot.
Yeah, I could see that. That's definitely. I've thought about that as well. As maybe Miss Minutes has more to do than we think.
Because she was very much in the marketing on the posters and all that kind of stuff, and I was like, okay, maybe they just think it's a cool animated character, and they didn't really do anything like this before, and it kind of leans into like the weirdness of Loki, and plus it's Sarah Strong, so you want her to be on the poster, or it means you're doing something with the character. So I'm not really sure what to expect there.
And before we move on, the one thing I do want to go back and say is I like how they've shown Loki's transformation. It's basically the show started with he wants to take out the TVA so he can control it, and now he still wants to take out the TVA, but it's because he realizes they're like a corrupt organization. So I kind of like the writing aspect of how his end goal hasn't changed, but it's his motivation that changed.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I didn't think about it like that, but you're right. I think it really does show the change in Loki. I think this has been a fascinating show so far, and I can't wait to get to the finale just to see how it all wraps up, just because they've done so well so far. They've really impressed me, and there hasn't been an episode yet where I've been like, wow, that was a real dud, or that was like some huge, like, ass-pulling Ralph Bohner kind of plot twist that didn't fit with what I wanted in the show at all.
But so, I feel like everything hinges on who's in the castle, because if someone in the castle is like someone completely out of, I feel like if it's Kang, it'll be fine. If it's, another Loki variant, we'll be fine. Even if it's like some type of Miss Minutes thing, we could be fine. But I feel like if it's no one's in the castle and it's really Sylvie and she's been lying to Loki the whole time and blah blah blah, then I'm just gonna be like, all right, this is dumb. Or if it's any other kind of thing that's not really been set up, then I feel like it'll be a letdown and kind of sour the whole series. But
yeah, my biggest fear is that it's just some guy or like some monster or something like that. Like it's not going to be any character. It's just going to be like, oh, the bad guy that they have to fight in the finale,
Yeah.
But as long as I can nail this finale, though, I'm feeling confident this could be my favorite of the MCU shows so far.
Yeah, me too.
I also have a theory that I wrote my notes here I want to mention right before we finish, in that when Old Man Loki, Richard Grant's talking, he mentions like how he survived the death of Thanos and says, oh, I created an apparition so believable that Thanos even believed it, and then I kind of floated out in space for years and years and went to a planet, and all of that kind of gives like his origin story of how he escaped Thanos.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of running on the theory maybe that our Loki will remember that conversation in his timeline. So if we end this show with our Loki going back onto his timeline, essentially where he was supposed to be at in the first place, this could be a way for him to kind of get around. Like if he, a few years later, is faced with Thanos and remembers what Old Man Loki told him back in the day, maybe he spends years and years training to get to that point. Now he knows when he dies. Now he knows how he dies, and he knows how he can avoid it if he knows ahead of time to practice up his illusion magic, practice up this and that, and it could be a way for the MCU to retcon their way into making this secondary Loki survive through the end of Thanos and maybe be like a reoccurring Marvel character again.
See, I think they could do that because there's just some theories based around that. I also think because the TVA exists without time, he could pop back out on the other side of the event, like make a portal and pop back out on the other side of the, basically the 5 years later after the Avengers fight Thanos, and boom, there we go, Loki's back, and he's right back in the timeline, and it's this new changed Loki.
Yeah, I think I'm also curious how much Loki's going to be present going forward in the show or in the MCU.
Yeah.
Like, is he going to be a main character, or is he going to be like once in a while he shows up, or is he just going to be a TV exclusive character?
Yeah.
I'm excited for that too. A lot hinged on the finale. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yep.